Hey, how's it going? I thought I'd do a short little stream today. I've been wanting to stream for a while. I haven't streamed in about 3 weeks because some things came up. I was busy, but I'll stream when I can. And I think things might be smoothing out a bit now. So, anyways, glad to be back. So, without rambling on and on and on, I'm just going to kind of get right to it today. I still haven't generated a new world yet. I want to do that, but like I said, I've been busy, so I just haven't gotten around to it. So, we'll just stick with this spot for now. Oh no, my kitten's doing something. I gotta stop him. I'll be right back. He's he's grabbing he's grabbing the blanket that I cover my PlayStation with. That's, that's not yours. You're a goofball. He likes to grab blankets. He's very possessive. He likes to think he owns everything here. And he'll grab a blanket and he'll put the blanket where he wants it. But Beanie, this blanket is not for you, okay? I'm gonna put this in here. Yes, that was very nice timing, kitty. Good job. You're a funny cat. Alright. Give me a hug. Oh, no hug for me. No, he's left the room now. Okay. Alright, where was I? So I'll continue with the Grimm's fairy tales. And I kind of have a bunch of different things I want to read. So rather than kind of like committing to one thing, I'm just going to read what I'm in the mood to read. Like I still want to read The Lord of the Rings, and I'll start with The Hobbit. But I don't want to necessarily feel like once I get that started, I just have to stick with that. Because, I mean, honestly, that's going to take so long. It might be nice to just kind of break it up a bit. I've got this book about ancient mysteries and ancient civilizations that I picked up on a whim probably about like 7 years ago. There was this new library that opened up. So I went to go check it out, and that was the one book that I found. It's a massive book, though. It's over 600 pages. So it'd be a long thing, but I figure when I'm in the mood to read that, I'll read that. And I might want to read that book about cats more. And I want to read Return to Oz. So I'm just going to kind of read whatever I'm in the mood to read. So if I have to like break it up and take a break from a book, that's okay. So anyways, I'll continue with some Grimm's fairy tales today. And I might even switch it up midstream. I don't know. I'll see how I feel. But yeah. So, we'll do that. So I guess for now I'll just get started. I'll read a few stories and then see where it goes from there. As long as my kitten will let me. He's up to something. He's in the process of winding down for a nap. So he's fighting it. He doesn't want to sleep yet, but he will. I think he's heading over to his bunk bed right now. And he's just hanging out. Alright. So I guess we'll stay here. I kind of like this angle for now. Let's go with that for now. That's less claustrophobic. No. He's trying to get the PlayStation. Beans. Are you going to be a good boy? Come on. You're a good kitty. There's a good boy. He's getting ready to use the restroom here. I hope he doesn't blow it up in here right as I start reading. I'd have to scoop the box, otherwise I'll be choking on his fumes. Well, this is the nice thing about just getting started without an audience. I can just sort of do whatever, not worry about wasting people's time. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can just skip right ahead. Now he's just having a pee-pee. He's not gonna smell up the room. Okay, good boy. Good boy. Should I go pee-pee? There you go. Good boy. Alright. Oh, before I forget. Let's go ahead and turn this down. I think what I want to build when I generate a new world, I'll kind of just cruise around and find a nice spot. I'd like to build a little mini castle. I know it's not necessarily like original, but that just sounds fun. And rather than try to like, because if I try to build, I was talking about building like the cottage from Snow White, but I don't want to say I'm a perfectionist, but if I do that, I'm going to try and get it like as accurately as I possibly can, which is fun in its own way, but I just want to kind of use my imagination and build a castle from scratch and not really have to like stick to any blueprints or anything, just kind of go with it. So maybe that'll be the first project, is we can build a little, not a big massive castle, but just like a little mini tiny castle. That'd be fun. Alright, let's get on over to the story. And my TV is gonna... I don't know why it does that. Just give me a second here. Gotta reboot the TV. So today's Wednesday. It's 9:15. Which means there won't be any gardeners or landscapers showing up and making a bunch of noise today, so that's good. Makes for better listening when you don't hear a weed whacker in the background. Alright, so the story we're on now, I thought I was focused on it. I gotta focus on the window here. I thought I did. I guess not. Alright. Now we're good. This is story number 7 in my copy of the Grimm's Fairy Tales. And the title is The Stolen Pennies. One day, a father was sitting at the table with his wife and children, and a good friend who was visiting him, and they were having their noonday meal. As they were sitting there, the clock struck 12, and the visitor saw the door open, and a pale child dressed in snow-white clothes entered. Oh, I've heard this one before. Did I? I don't think I read this one, but I know I've heard it before. It seems like I read it last time, but maybe not. He didn't look around or say anything, but went silently into the next room. Shortly thereafter, he returned and went away just as quietly as he had entered. On the second and third day, the child came again. Finally, the visitor asked the father who was the beautiful child that was entering the room every day at noon. The father answered that he knew nothing about him. He hadn't seen anything. The next day, as the clock struck noon, the child entered again, and the visitor pointed the child out to the father, but he didn't see the boy. Neither did the mother nor the children. The visitor stood up, went to the door, opened it a little, and looked inside. There he saw the pale child sitting on the floor, digging and rummaging in the cracks of the boards. However, as soon as the child noticed the visitor, he disappeared. Now the visitor told the family what he had seen and gave an exact description of the boy. The mother was then able to recognize the child and said, "Alas, it's my own dear child who died 4 weeks ago." Then they ripped up the boards of the floor and found 2 pennies that the boy had received from his mother at one time to give to a poor man. But the child had thought, "You can buy yourself a biscuit for that." Therefore, he had kept the pennies and hidden them in the cracks of the floor. This is why he hadn't been able to rest in his grave, and had come back every day at noon to look for the pennies. So the parents gave the money to a poor man, and after that the little child was never seen again. Yeah, I almost feel like I read that one last time, but it can't be possible. I don't know, maybe, anyways, I know I've heard that one before. I think that's what it is. Okay. Story number 8. The Hand with the Knife. There once was a little girl who had 3 brothers, and the boys meant the world to her mother. Yet the little girl was always neglected, treated badly, and forced to go out early in the morning every day to dig up peat from the dry ground on the heath, which they used for making fires and cooking. To top it all off, she was given an old, blunt shovel to perform this nasty work. But the little girl had an admirer who was an elf and lived in a hill near her mother's house. Whenever she went by the hill, he would stretch out his hand from the rocky slope and offer her a knife that had miraculous powers and could cut through anything. She used this knife to cut out the peat and would finish her work quickly. Then she would return home happily with the necessary load, and when she walked by the rocky slope, she would knock twice, and the hand would reach out and take back the knife. When the mother noticed how swiftly and easily she came back home with the peat, she told the girl's brothers that there must be someone helping her. Otherwise, it would be impossible for her to complete the work so fast. So, the brothers crept after her and watched her receive the magic knife. They overtook her and forced her to give it to them. Then they returned to the rocky slope, knocked the way she had done, and when the good elf stretched out his hand, they cut it off with his very own knife. The bloody arm drew back, and since the elf believed that his beloved had betrayed him, he was never seen after that. Man, that's messed up. Alright. Story number 9. The 12 Brothers. Once upon a time, there was a king who had 12 children, all boys. Moreover, he didn't want to have a daughter, and said to his wife, "If you give birth to our 13th child, and it's a girl, I shall have the 12 boys killed. However, if it's a boy, then they'll all remain alive and stay together." The queen thought of talking him out of this, but the king refused to hear anything more about this topic. "If everything turns out like I said, they must die. I'd rather chop off their heads myself than let a girl be among them." The queen was sad about this because she loved her sons with all her heart and didn't know how she could save them. Finally, she went to the youngest, who was her favorite, and revealed to him what the king had decided. "Dearest child," she said, "go into the forest with your 11 brothers. Stay there, and don't come home. One of you should keep watch on a tree and look over here toward the tower. If I give birth to a little son, I'll raise a white flag on top of the tower. However, if it's a little daughter, I'll raise a red flag. If you see that it's red, then save yourselves. Flee into the wide world, and may our dear Lord protect you. I'll get up every night and pray that you won't freeze in the winter and are able to warm yourselves by a fire, and that when it's hot in the summer, you can rest in a cool forest and sleep." After she gave her blessing to her sons, they went out into the forest, where they frequently looked toward the tower. One of them had to sit on top of a high tree and constantly keep watch. Soon a flag was hoisted, but it wasn't a white one. It was a blood-red flag that foreshadowed their doom. As soon as the brothers caught sight of it, they all became angry and cried out, "Why should we lose our lives because of a girl?" Then they all swore to remain in the middle of the forest and to keep on their guard, and if a maiden were to appear, they would kill her without mercy. Soon after this, they searched for a cave where the forest was the darkest, and that's where they began to live. Every morning, 11 of the brothers went off to hunt. One of them had to remain home, cook, and keep house. Whenever they encountered a maiden, she was treated without mercy and lost her life. This is how they lived for many years. In the meantime, their little sister grew up, and she was the only child left at home. One day there was a large amount of washing to do, and among the clothes there were 12 shirts for boys. "Whose shirts are these?" the princess asked the washerwoman. "They are much too small for my father." It was then that the washerwoman told her that she had once had 12 brothers, but they had mysteriously gone away. Nobody knew where because the king had wanted to have them killed, and the 12 shirts belonged to the 12 brothers. The little sister was astonished that she had never heard of her 12 brothers, and during the afternoon, as the clothes were drying and she was sitting in the meadow, she recalled the words of the washerwoman. After giving considerable thought to what she had heard, she stood up, took the 12 shirts, and went into the forest where her brothers were living. The little sister made her way straight to the cave that served as her brother's dwelling. 11 of them were out hunting, and only one of them, who had to cook, was at home. When he caught sight of the maiden, he composed himself and drew his sword. "Kneel down! Your red blood will flow this very second." But the maiden pleaded, "Dear sir, let me live. I'll stay with you and serve you honestly. I'll cook and keep house." She spoke these words to the youngest brother, and he took pity on her because of her beauty and spared her life. Later, when his 11 brothers returned home and were astonished to find a maiden alive in their cave, he said to them, "Dear brothers, this girl came to our cave, and when I wanted to cut her to pieces, she pleaded for her life so much and said that she would serve us faithfully and keep house that I spared her life." The others thought that this would be a great benefit to them, because now all 12 of them could go hunting, and they were satisfied with this arrangement. Then the maiden showed them the 12 shirts and told them that she was their sister. Indeed, they were all happy, very happy, about this, and were glad that they hadn't killed her. Now, the little sister took over all the household chores, and when the brothers went out hunting, she gathered wood and herbs, kept the fire going, made up the beds nice and white and clean, and did everything with zeal without getting tired. One day, when she finished with all the work, she took a walk in the woods and came to a place where there were 12 large, beautiful white lilies. Since they pleased her so much, she plucked all 12 of them. No sooner did she do this than an old woman stood before her. "Oh, my daughter," she said, "why didn't you let the 12 budding flowers just stand there? They're your 12 brothers. Now they've been changed into ravens and are lost forever." The little sister began to weep and said, "Isn't there any way that I can save them?" "No, there isn't any way in the world except one that's so difficult you won't be able to rescue them. You must spend the next 12 years without speaking. If you say one single word, even if there's only an hour left, everything will be in vain, and your brothers will die that very moment." Well, the little sister responded by climbing a tall tree in the forest, where she took a place. She wanted to sit there 12 years without saying a word to free her brothers. But it so happened that a king was out riding and hunting in the forest, and as he rode by the tree, his dog stood still and barked. So the king stopped, looked up, and was very amazed by the princess's beauty. He called to her and asked her whether she wanted to become his wife. However, she remained silent and only nodded a bit with her head. So the king himself dismounted, helped her down from the tree, and lifted her up before him onto his horse. There he brought her home to his castle. Meanwhile, the princess did not utter one word, and the king thought that she was mute. They would have lived happily with one another if it hadn't been for the king's mother, who began to slander the young queen in front of her son. "She's a common beggar that you've dug up from nowhere, and she's doing the most disgraceful things behind your back." Since the young queen couldn't defend herself, the king was led astray and finally believed what his mother said. So he sentenced his wife to death, and an enormous fire was built in the courtyard, where she was to be burned to death. Soon, the queen was standing in the flames that grazed the fringes of her dress. 1 minute was left before the 12 years of her silence would be completed. There was a noise in the air, and 12 ravens swooped down into the courtyard. As soon as they touched the ground, they became 12 handsome princes, who instantly put out the fire's flames and led their sister to safety. Then she spoke once again and told the king how everything had happened and how she had to save her 12 brothers. Indeed, they were all pleased that everything turned out so well. Now they had to decide what they should do with the evil mother-in-law. Well, they stuck her into a barrel full of boiling oil and poisonous snakes. And she died a ghastly death. The end. Wow. Boiling oil is one thing, but boiling oil with poisonous snakes. So are the snakes like boiling proof? Or they're just like boiled snakes, boiled dead snakes, but it's just like to add insult to injury. Well, I assume that the snakes were somehow alive. They must have okay, so they boiled the oil and it was like nice and hot, and then they tossed the snakes in right before they put the queen in there. So the snakes are like writhing in agony, and then the queen's in there and they're biting oh man, that's awful. Oh, yikes. Okay, let's move on. That's a grim image. Get it? See what I did there? Grimm's fairy tales. Haha. Sorry. I had to. All right. Woo, man, that was intense at the end there. Dancing to death in hot iron shoes is one thing, but being bitten by poisonous snakes in a barrel full of boiling oil. I'm gonna pass on that one, thank you. I thought being burned to death was bad, but I'm gonna be honest, that sounds even worse. Okay. Sorry, I gotta sip my tea here, it's pretty good. I think my cat's finally calming down. Hey kitty, he's calming down. He's sitting right here next to me, within an arm's reach, and I'm petting him right now. He's a good boy. He's a 1.5 years old. He moved in when he was 4 weeks old, and I had to feed him milk from a bottle. He's a good boy. Alright, let's keep going. Let's see how long this one is. This one's pretty long too. Not that long. This one's called Riff Raff, and it's the 10th story in my version. The rooster said to the hen, "The nuts are ripe. Let's go up the hill and for once eat our full fill of nuts before the squirrel hauls them away." "Yes," responded the hen. "Let's go and have a good time together." So they went up the hill, and since it was such a bright day, they stayed till evening. Now, I don't know whether it was because they had stuffed themselves too much, or whether they had become too high and mighty, but they didn't want to return home on foot. So the rooster had to build a small carriage made out of nutshells. When it was finished, the hen got in and said to the rooster, "Now you can just harness yourself to it." No," said the rooster, "you have some nerve. I'd rather go home by foot than let myself be harnessed to this carriage. No, that wasn't part of our bargain. I'll gladly be coachman and sit on the box, but I refuse to pull this carriage." Now, as they were quarreling, a duck came by, quacking, and pouted. "You thieves! Who said you could come up on my nut hill? Just you wait. You'll pay for this." She charged at the rooster with a wide-open beak, but the rooster was on his toes and threw himself at the duck's body nice and hard. Then he dug up his spurs into her so violently that the duck begged for mercy, and willingly let herself be harnessed to the carriage as punishment. Now, the rooster sat down on the box as coachman, and off they went in a gallop. "Duck, run as fast as you can," cried the rooster. After they had gone some distance, they encountered two travelers on foot, a needle and a pin, who called and asked them to stop. They said it would soon be very dark, and they wouldn't be able to go one step farther. Besides, the road was dirty, so they asked if they could have a ride. They had been at the tailor's tavern outside the town gate, and had had one beer too many, which made them late as well. Since they were thin and didn't take up much room, the rooster let them both get in, but they had to promise not to step on his or the hen's feet. Later that evening, they came to an inn, and since they didn't want to travel any farther, and since the duck was not walking well, but swayed from side to side, they decided to stop here. At first, the innkeeper raised a lot of objections and said his inn was already full. Moreover, he thought they were not a very distinguished-looking group. However, they used some sweet talk and offered him the egg that the hen had laid along the way, and told him that he could also keep the duck, who laid an egg a day. So finally he relented and said they could spend the night. Now they ordered some good hot food and had a merry time of it. Early the next morning, as the sun was rising and everyone was asleep, the rooster woke the hen, fetched the egg, pecked it open, and together they devoured it. After throwing the shells on the hearth, they went to the needle, who was still asleep, grabbed him by the head, and stuck him into the innkeeper's easy chair. Then they stuck the pin into the innkeeper's towel. Finally, without much ado, they flew away over the heath. I think that it might supposed to say hearth, but there's a typo there. So they flew away over the hearth. The duck, who liked to sleep in the open air and had spent the night in the yard, heard the flapping of their wings. So she roused herself, found a brook, and swam away. That went much faster than being harnessed to a carriage. A few hours later, the innkeeper got out of bed, washed himself, and took the towel to dry himself. However, the pin scratched his face, leaving a red mark from ear to ear. Then he went into the kitchen and wanted to light his pipe, but as he leaned over the hearth, the eggshells popped into his eyes. Ow. "Everything's attacking my head this morning," he said, and went to sit down in his easy chair to settle his bad mood. But he jumped up immediately and screamed, "Ow!" The needle had stuck him worse than the pin, and not in the head. Now he was completely angry, and suspected the guests who had arrived so late the night before. But when he went looking for them, they were gone. Then he swore he would never again let riffraff stay at his inn, especially when they eat so much, pay nothing, and play mean tricks on top of it all. The end. Okay. I'm going to have to get up and walk around in a minute here. Can I get... No, this one's too long. Oh, we got Rapunzel coming up, but the next one is not Rapunzel. The next one is Little Brother and Little Sister. So I'm going to actually get up, walk around a bit. I need to get up off the chair. Otherwise, I'll start to get like dizzy and feel weird. So, give me just a bit here. I'll be right back. I don't have any music or anything to put on right now. So, you'll just have to enjoy the silence for a minute. It won't take long. Excuse me, I'm stretching. My kitten's falling asleep. Alright, I'll be right back. If you're watching on YouTube, you can skip ahead or whatever. Let's see, the bird is going to sing in less than 20 minutes. The next bird to sing is going to be the white-throated sparrow, which where I live is the 10 o'clock bird. It's sunny today. It's really warm. We're getting kind of a sneak preview of spring. Spring's come to hang out for a bit, and then it's going to cool back down tomorrow, and then kind of be like winter again for a little while. But winter's on the way out. Spring's right around the corner. So right now it's spring-like, and then it'll be winter-like again, and then the blasted daylight savings time starting in about 2 weeks, which I really don't enjoy. I like this time zone much better, but I don't know, there's at least some advantage to the daylight savings. I'm not going to change my bird clock though, because it's perfectly synced up. And if I switch it an hour ahead, there's no way I'm going to get it. Like, it's just perfect. The bird sings right when the hour changes. Like, even with cell phone time, it's like to the second. So, and the bird clock is, I don't know how to explain it. I guess it's an analog clock, so it has hands. So if I mess with it, there's no way I'm going to get it that perfect again. So I'm not touching it. Which is fine. Well, I guess this doesn't have to be complete silence. I can just kind of chat a bit while I stand up. I'm going to do a couple little exercises here to get the blood flowing. I'm going to go for a walk after this. And then after that, I don't know. Alright. I guess that's good enough. So it's going to be a short one. I'll probably wrap it up pretty soon here. Maybe I could read a little bit more of this book about cats. Yeah, I might do that. And I still want to read Return to Oz. I think I'm kind of just about done with the Grimm's fairy tales. They're cool. But I like variety. I'm one of those people, I was born with an addictive personality, which doesn't mean I get addicted to one thing. People with addictive personalities, they constantly crave something new. They kind of become addicted to newness. So you would think it works the other way around, but like I've never been able, for the most part in general, like no matter how good a video game is, I'll get sick of it after a month. So like I can play it day in and day out from, morning till night, which is, I can do that, but then I'll get sick of it after a month. That's how, like, yeah. So I don't know. Anyways, my point is I like variety. I've always liked variety. New things. And kind of keeping the old things on a big enough rotation so that by the time I come back to something old, it feels new again, if that makes sense. I'm sure it does. Alright, so anyways, you don't need to hear me ramble on and on too much. And my kitten's getting in his bunk bed. He's got a teddy bear right next to him. It's funny. He loves his teddy bear. Okay. Let me get a sip of, I guess I'll go with the tea. I got coffee, tea, and apple cider vinegar. I'll go with the tea. Okay. Alright, let's do at least 2 more stories, and I might read a little bit of that cat book. A book about cats. Okay. This is story number 11. Page... I guess it's page, yeah. What does it say? Oh, well, okay. I don't know. Anyways, I guess page 83. Well, I don't know. This... Don't worry about it. Alright, let's say page 33. I'm getting like 2 different numbers here, which is confusing me. It's, yeah, anyways, it's pointless to go on about that. But it's story number 11, so that's all I need to know. Little brother and little sister. A little brother took his little sister by the hand and said, "Ever since our mother died, we've not had one moment of happiness. Our stepmother beats us every day, and when we come near her, she kicks us away with her foot. We get nothing but hard crusts of bread, just leftovers for food. And the dog under the table is better off. At least he gets a good chunk of meat to eat every now and then. Lord, have mercy on us. If our mother only knew. Come, let's go off together into the wide world." So they went away and came to a large forest, where they were so sad and so tired that they crept into a hollow tree and just wanted to die from hunger. Then they both fell asleep. When they woke the next morning, the sun was already high in the sky and warmed the hollow tree with its rays. "Little sister," said the little brother after a while, "I'm thirsty. If only I knew where to find a spring, I'd go and have a drink right away. Listen, I think I hear one trickling." "What good will that do?" the little sister answered. "Why do you want to drink when we just want to die from hunger?" But the little brother kept quiet and climbed out of the hollow tree, and since he always held his sister's hand tightly, she had to climb out with him. Now, their evil stepmother was a witch, and when she had noticed that the 2 children had left, she followed them and caused a clear little stream near the tree to trickle from some rocks and form a spring. The trickling spring was intended to lure the children and make their mouths water, but whoever drank from the spring would be changed into a little fawn. The little brother soon came to the spring with his sister, and when he saw the glittering water trickle over the stones into the spring, his thirst became even greater, and he wanted to drink some of the water. However, the little sister was fearful. She thought she heard the spring speak to her as it trickled. "Whoever drinks me will be changed into a fawn. Whoever drinks me will be changed into a fawn." So, she begged her little brother not to drink the water. "I don't hear anything," said the little brother. "I just hear how lovely the water is trickling. Let me go." Upon saying this, he lay down on the ground, leaned over, and drank. And as soon as he felt the first drop of water on his lips, he was changed into a little fawn sitting beside the spring. The little sister wept and wept. However, the witch was angry that she hadn't been able to lure the little sister to drink the water as well. After the girl wept for 3 days, she stood up, gathered some bulrushes, and wove them into a soft rope. Then she attached it to the little fawn and led him with her. She looked for a cave, and when she found one, she carried moss and foliage inside and made a soft bed for him. The next morning she went out with the fawn to a place with tender grass, and there she gathered the most beautiful grass, which he ate out of her hand. The fawn was delighted and romped about on the hills. In the evening, when the little sister was tired, she laid her head on the back of the fawn. It was her pillow, and this is how she fell asleep. If only her brother could have retained his human form, it would have been a wonderful life. For many years, they lived like this in the forest. Then, one day, the king went out on a hunt, and when he became lost, he stumbled upon the maiden with the little animal in the forest, and was amazed by her beauty. He lifted her up onto his horse and took her with him, while the fawn, attached by the rope, ran alongside. At the royal court, the maiden was treated with honor. Beautiful young women had to serve her, but she herself was more beautiful than any of the other ladies. She never let the fawn out of her sight, and she tended him with care. Shortly after her arrival, the queen mother died, and the king wed the sister, and they lived together in great joy. However, the stepmother had heard about the good fortune of the poor little sister. She had thought that the maiden had long since been torn to pieces by wild beasts, but they had never done anything to her. Indeed, the maiden was now queen of the realm. The witch was so angry about this that she could only think of some way she might ruin the queen's happiness. When the queen gave birth to a handsome prince the next year, and the king was out hunting, the witch appeared in the form of a chambermaid and entered the room where the queen was recovering from the birth. "The bath has been prepared for you," she said. "It will do you good and strengthen you. Come, before the water becomes too cold." The witch led the queen into the bathroom and locked the door behind her. Inside, there was a brutally hot fire, and the beautiful queen was suffocated to death. Now, the witch had a daughter of her own, and she endowed her with the outward shape of the queen and laid her in bed in place of the queen. In the evening, when the king returned home, he didn't realize that he had a false wife. But in the night, and the nurse saw this, the real queen appeared in the room. She went to the cradle, lifted the child to her breast, and suckled him. Then she plumped up his tiny mattress, laid the baby in the cradle again, and covered him. After this, she went into the corner where the fawn slept and stroked his back. This is how she came and went every night without saying a word. One time, however, she entered again and said, "How's my child? How's my fawn? Twice more I'll come, then I'll be gone." Then she did what she had usually done the other nights. Meanwhile, the nurse woke the king and told him secretly what had occurred. So, the next night the king kept watch, and he too saw how the queen came, and he clearly heard her words. "How's my child? How's my fawn? Once more I'll come, and then I'll be gone." However, he didn't dare to speak to her. The following night he kept watch again, and the queen said, "How's my child? How's my fawn? There's no more time. Soon I'll be gone." The king could no longer restrain himself. He sprang forth and embraced her, and as soon as he touched her, she was restored to life, rosy red and well. The false queen was led into the forest, where the wild beasts devoured her. The evil stepmother was burned at the stake, and as the fire consumed her, the fawn was transformed, and the brother and sister were once again together and lived happily until the end of their days. The end. Cool. I like that one. So, there's an obvious, there's I don't know how to, there's a kind of a pattern where, like, a lot of the same things kind of tend to repeat themselves in a lot of the stories. Like, we're only on to the 12th story, Rapunzel, and, like, already there's a lot of, I guess you could say, reoccurring themes. Like, that's what the introduction was saying when I was reading the introduction, a lot of, like, being led into the forest, escaping, terrible parents and whatnot. So, yeah. Maybe that's why I'm ready to kind of move on to something else. I've experienced this for now, and we can always come back to it. Okay, well, we're going to read Rapunzel, though. How long is Rapunzel? It's also kind of a long one. It's about the same length. So this will be the last Grimm's Fairy Tales for today, this Rapunzel. And then I might read a bit of the book about cats. And that'll probably do it for today. And so yeah, I've got that book about ancient civilizations. That's kind of something I've been getting into. I want to learn about ancient civilizations. I've always liked history. I'm not good at remembering dates and times, but yeah, I like to hear about the stories. So that'll be cool, and it's a big, giant book, so that'll last a long time. And then I don't know, I kind of do want to read Return to Oz before I move on to The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, so I've got all the time in the world, as long as, my apartment doesn't explode or anything like that. I think we'll be good. So, I do live next to an airport. A plane could crash into my room any moment, but anyways, I'm just joking. Anyways. So yeah, as long as there's smooth sailing. I think, if I'm dealing with other things, I'm not gonna force myself to stream, because if I'm not feeling it, nobody else is gonna feel it. But I'd like to stream at least once a week. When I can. I'd like to stream 3 times a week. I think I can, manage twice a week. But anyways, we'll see what happens. I'm here now. So yeah. Alright. Let's go ahead and read Rapunzel. Once upon a time, there lived a husband and wife who had been wishing for a child many years, but it had all been in vain. Finally, the woman became pregnant. Now, in the back of their house, the couple had a small window that overlooked a fairy's garden filled with all kinds of flowers and herbs. But nobody ever dared to enter it. Here comes the white-throated sparrow. Well, it's 10 a.m. where I am right now. And that's the bird singing in the garden we were just talking about. And so one day, however, when the wife was standing at the window and looking down into the garden, she noticed a bed of wonderful Rapunzel. She had a great craving to eat some of the lettuce, and yet she knew that she couldn't get any. So she began to waste away and looked wretched. Her husband eventually became horrified and asked what was ailing her. "If I don't get any of that Rapunzel from the garden behind our house, I shall have to die." Her husband loved her very much and thought, "No matter what it costs, you're going to get her some Rapunzel." So, one evening he quickly climbed over the high wall into the garden, grabbed a handful of Rapunzel, and brought the lettuce to his wife. Then she immediately made a salad and ate it with great zest. However, the Rapunzel tasted so good to her, so very good, that her craving for it became 3 times greater by the next day. Her husband knew that if she was ever to be satisfied, he had to climb into the garden once more. And so he went over the wall into the garden, but was extremely terrified when he stood face to face with the fairy, who angrily berated him for daring to come into the garden and stealing her Rapunzel. He excused himself as best he could by explaining that his wife was pregnant and that it had become too dangerous to deny her the Rapunzel. "Well, all right," the fairy finally spoke. "I shall permit you to take as much Rapunzel as you like, but only if you give me the child that your wife is carrying." In his fear, the man agreed to everything, and when his wife gave birth, the fairy appeared at once, named the baby girl Rapunzel, and took her away. Rapunzel grew to be the most beautiful child under the sun. But when she turned 12, the fairy locked her in a very high tower that had neither doors nor stairs, only a little window high above. Whenever the fairy wanted to enter the tower, she would stand below and call out, "Rapunzel! Rapunzel! Let down your hair!" Rapunzel had radiant hair, as fine as spun gold. Each time she heard the fairy's voice, she unpinned her braids and wound them around a hook on the window. Then she let her hair drop 20 yards, and the fairy would climb up on it. One day, a young prince went riding through the forest and came upon the tower. He looked up and saw beautiful Rapunzel at the window. When he heard her singing with such a sweet voice, he fell completely in love with her. However, since there were no doors in the tower and no ladder could ever reach her high window, he fell into despair. Nevertheless, he went out into the forest every day until one time he saw the fairy, who called out, "Rapunzel! Rapunzel! Let down your hair!" As a result, he now knew what kind of ladder he needed to climb up into the tower. He took careful note of the words he had to say, and the next day, at dusk, he went to the tower and called out, "Rapunzel! Rapunzel! Let down your hair!" So she let her hair drop, and when her braids were at the bottom of the tower, he tied them around him, and she pulled him up. Now at first Rapunzel was terribly afraid, but soon the young prince pleased her so much that she agreed to see him every day and pull him up into the tower. Thus, for a while, they had a merry time and enjoyed each other's company. The fairy didn't become aware of this until, one day, Rapunzel began talking and said to her, "Tell me, Mother Gothel, why are my clothes becoming too tight? They don't fit me anymore." "You godless child," the fairy replied, "what's this I hear?" And she immediately realized that she had been betrayed and became furious. Then she grabbed Rapunzel's beautiful hair, wrapped it around her left hand a few times, picked up a pair of scissors with her right hand, and snip, snap, the hair was cut off. Afterward, the fairy banished Rapunzel to a desolate land, where she had to live in great misery. In the course of time, she gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. On the same day that the fairy had banished Rapunzel, she fastened the braids that she had cut off to the hook on the window. And that evening, when the prince came and called out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair," she let the braids down. But when the prince climbed up into the tower, he was astonished to find the fairy instead of Rapunzel. "Do you know what, you villain?" the angry fairy said. "Rapunzel is lost to you forever." In his despair, the prince threw himself from the tower. He escaped with his life, but he lost both eyes. Sadly, he wandered around in the forest, eating nothing but grass and roots, and did nothing but weep. Some years later, he made his way to the desolate land where Rapunzel was leading a wretched existence with her children. When he heard her voice, it sounded familiar at first, and then he immediately recognized it. And she recognized him, too, and embraced him. 2 of her tears fell upon his eyes. Then his eyes became clear again, and he could see as usual. And it just ends. The end. It just ends. I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you. That's just the end. I feel like this is an edited down version, which I've read. I don't know if it was in the introduction itself. No, I was listening to an audiobook of it was either an audiobook reading of Snow White, or more specifically it's called Little Snow White, or it was Rumpelstiltskin. I was listening to one of the other, and it was elaborating on how some of the stories were edited down because there were complaints about how they weren't child-friendly enough. Even though the introduction of this book clearly points out that it's not just for children, it's for people of all ages. But then again, if they wanted to sanitize it a bit to make it less obscene, which is what the complaints were about. So this is like even pre-Disney, like even before Disney started doing their interpretations of it. People kind of wanted to water them down a bit. I feel like, and I think this is one of the ones that was mentioned, how like when the prince meets Rapunzel in the tower, they cut some bits out, you know. Anyways, I feel like that had more of an ending, but they just kind of cut the ending out. So, anyways, there you go. There's this version of Rapunzel. They could have just added "and they lived happily ever after." There you go. I'm gonna add that bit myself. That's mine. So his eyes became clear. He could see as usual, and they lived happily ever after. You're welcome. Okay. Let me see. If this one's super short, I'll go ahead and read it. It's not. Alright, so we're going to leave it there for now. So I'm going to go ahead and close that out. Okay, cool. And I'm going to go ahead and read a bit of that book about cats before I wrap it up here. And then I'm going to go for a walk and just carry on with the rest of my day. It's only 10 o'clock. It's still early. So the book is an actual book. It's not a digital copy. So I'm going to grab it in just a second here. Let me see if the tiger is still... Yeah, he's... Oh, the PS4 is about to go into rest mode. Wow. Well, I caught that just in time. All I have to do is jiggle the controller and the gyros will kick in. There we go. We're good now. I don't know if you could see that or not. It might have been like that weird pixel box, or you might have been able to see that. Oh, I caught that just in time. I need to turn that off. Yeah, okay. Yeah, because I could be reading something and I would have never even noticed that. Man, I'm glad I caught that. My stream would have just suddenly cut off. I wouldn't have even known about it. Be sitting here reading on and on to nobody. Alright, well, I caught that just in time. So I'll have to fix that when I'm done. So the name of this book is The Tribe of the Tiger, Cats and Their Culture. Let me see how long this chapter is. Probably won't read... Oh, it's a short one. I can probably read this. This is fine. So I don't think I'll do anything, any more reading after this one. I think I'll be wrapping it up after this. Alright, so moving on to something else now. Change of pace. Change of scenery. We'll read a book about cats. And last time, the very first stream I did within the last couple months, I read the introduction. So this is chapter 1. It says part 1, The Animal. And there's a sketch, an illustration of a cat, and he's holding what looks like a rat. That's a pretty big rodent. Looks like it's probably a rat. The story of cats is a story of meat, and begins with the end of the dinosaurs. Before their mysterious disappearance, the dinosaurs had reached a sort of climax in the art of meat eating, which had begun simply enough, almost with life itself, when the early swarms of small aquatic creatures had little else to eat except one another. For these early swimmers, plants as we know them were not an option, since plants had not evolved. As life became more complicated, hunting and meat eating became more complicated too. Most of the vertebrates were meat eaters. Certainly most of the fish ate other fish, as did the first amphibians, who in turn became food for the emerging reptiles. During Permian and Triassic times, predatory dinosaurs crowded out most of their meat-eating forebears, ending the long reign of the big carnivorous amphibians. From Jurassic times onward, even the largest dinosaurs had predatory dinosaurs trying to kill them, with more dinosaurs waiting to scavenge the remains. The mammals had no chance to mount any kind of challenge. As a result, when after 130 million years of highly successful predation, the dinosaurs vanished, they left behind a most unusual situation. A world newly free of carnivores of any appreciable size. Even as recently as the Paleocene, 65 million years ago, only 2 groups of mammals could have been called carnivorous, and by today's standards, or indeed by the former high standards of the predatory dinosaurs, neither of these would have seemed particularly adept at hunting. The first group, called the creodonts, were not built for speed and probably specialized in carrion. And the second group, called the myacids, ancestors of the modern carnivores, were for the most part very small and possibly specialized in insects. In other words, despite the new situation, both groups continued to eat what they had been eating when the dinosaurs were still around. Thus, there was no one to molest the millions of large, hairy, milk-fed animals who soon evolved to roam the fertile forest left by the dinosaurs, browsing the trees and bushes without much fear of predators. The earlier herbivores became a vast, slow-moving food supply which eventually even they themselves could not ignore. A few of them, including an enormous hog-like, bull-sized creature called Andrewsarchus, gave up leaves for meat. The largest carnivorous mammal ever to have lived on land, this minotaur with a carnivorous habit probably lacked the delicate sensibilities of a true carnivore such as a dog or cat or a weasel, and surely must have been the most frightening predator the world has ever seen. By all that is sensible, the creodonts should have been developing themselves to better exploit the world of meat. Surprisingly, however, they went into decline. Their eventual extinction seems puzzling. Not only had some of them grown to the size of bears, so that they were much heftier than their insect-eating competition, but they were in the very act of evolving larger brains and learning to run faster. Even so, they disappeared. And thus, a way opened for the modern carnivores. Encouraged by the magnificent opportunities and in the great absence of rivals, the former little insect eaters grew and changed. From them emerged two bloodlines, sometimes known as the vulpavines, or fox tribe, and the viverines, or mongoose tribe. Students of Latin should simply ignore the fact that vivera means ferret, since a ferret is not a kind of mongoose at all, but kind of weasel and belongs with dogs in the fox tribe. Also best to ignored is that vivera comes from were, the Indo-European root word for squirrel. Squirrels aren't carnivores, carnivores of course, or carnivorous, and except as prey have no place in this story. During the Oligocene, members of the fox tribe started turning themselves into dogs. During the Oligocene, members of the fox tribe started turning into the dogs. I could have just kept going. Anyways, bear with me, folks. Into the dogs, the bears, the raccoons, and the weasels. Members of the mongoose tribe became the modern mongooses, the hyenas, and the cats. So we're talking about evolution. You get what I'm saying. While these new carnivores became the hunters of the plains and forests, and also, by Miocene times, hunters of the sea as walruses, sea lions, and seals, many of the fox tribes secured themselves a place close to the evolutionary middle ground. Although they were carnivores, they may have slowly weaned themselves from the insectivorous habits by eating some vegetable matter too. Insects and plants, after all, are so intermixed that they can almost be called two parts of the same thing, and go together like franks and beans. So to take a bite of one is often to nip of the other by mistake, especially if whoever is eating has a big mouth. If, like most animals, you have no hands to pick up your food but must put your mouth directly on it, when you snap up an insect, you sometimes can't help biting off a piece of the plant it was sitting on. Conversely, if you eat the plant, you often chew up some insects accidentally. Allegedly, it's hard to tell the difference. A man who ate a caterpillar in desperate, failed efforts to impress a woman said later that the caterpillar had tasted like the plant he'd found it on. What? I mean, that's one way to impress somebody, I guess. To the early fox tribe, the ability to eat vegetables proved very helpful in times of meat shortages. Today, some of its members, the raccoons and bears, for instance, can eat almost anything. This allows them to exploit a wide range of habitats. Others, such as the dogs and modern foxes, can endure a decline in their usual meat supply by varying their diet to include fruits, legumes, insects, and other forms of nourishment. One very early member of the bear family, the bamboo-eating giant panda, has passed right through meat-eating into vegetarianism again, and thus has become, paradoxically, a vegetarian carnivore. The cats, however, took a riskier path. In general, the descendants of the mongoose tribe eat fewer vegetables than do the descendants of the fox tribe, and the cats eat almost none. A cat might eat the chyme that had been in a victim's stomach, or take a little catnip as a recreational drug, or chew some leaves for vitamins, or swallow a few sharp blades of grass as a scour. But cats can't extract nourishment from these or other vegetables. Well-meaning human vegetarians notwithstanding, cats must eat animal protein or they slowly decline and eventually starve. Not for them the comfortable middle ground, eating meat one day and berries the next, and no carrion either. Fresh meat killed by themselves or by their mothers is virtually the only item on the feline menu. The cats have chosen the edge. Survival at the edge is no easy matter. The food of cats is not found at the tips of branches, waiting aromatically in the sun to disappear down someone's throat. Fruit, after all, is the reward offered by a plant to anybody willing to swallow its seeds, soften the husks, and eventually put them on the ground, securely packed in fertilizer and far away from the parent plant to offer any competition. In contrast, the food of cats is frightened of the cat and is dedicated to its own survival. It is intelligent, brave, fast-moving, often well-armed, and sometimes much larger than the cat who wants it. So, to live at the edge, the cats were challenged to become highly skilled as hunters. And this they did. Hunting preoccupies a cat almost from birth. The behavior of kittens at play is hunting behavior, and nothing else. Because a cat can hunt without eating but cannot eat without hunting, hunting means life to cats. So much so that the process of hunting matters more than the resulting food. A cat of ours, named Orion because of his unquenchable hunting, and also because he seemed to say Orion when he gave his ringing, far-traveling call, brought no fewer than 30 chipmunks into our house during just one summer. Head high, pace determined, jaws bulging with the chipmunk who was forced to ride, feet forward in his mouth, Orion would hurry to the living room, put down his victim, and step back. Of course, once the poor creature got its bearings, it would try to escape, and Orion would chase it from room to room. Up and down the curtains the chipmunk would run, with the cat leaping after him. Up and down the stairs, over the beds, under the sofa, over the kitchen table, through the sink and out into the hall. The moment my husband and I would hear what the cat was doing, we would of course join the chase, in hopes of rescuing not only the chipmunk, but also our things. Even though we almost always managed to catch the chipmunk and let it out, thus depriving Orion of his sport and his prey, he nevertheless seemed to enjoy our participation, possibly because we added to the excitement, or possibly because house cats, contrary to what many people believe, do in fact hunt cooperatively when the opportunity arises. They don't cooperate as well as lions do, but they cooperate to some extent. A practice that seems to have developed from the tendency of kittens to follow their hunting mothers, trying to take part as best they can. At any rate, perhaps in hopes of our participation, Orion released chipmunks again and again, to the point where we hated to hear the cat door slam because we knew what was coming. Interestingly enough, our area could not possibly have sustained the 30 chipmunks captured by Orion. At most, 10 or 12 might have lived in our woods and stone walls. This meant that Orion was catching some chipmunks for a second or third time. One chipmunk lost a tail, and 2 were slightly wounded by Orion's inconsiderate games. But only 3 of his victims died, and not from any lack of hunting ability on the part of the great Orion, who enjoyed his sport for one summer and then gave it up for reasons of his own, but not from a lack of chipmunks. Had he been cruel? Well, yes, by human standards. But human standards mean little to the cats. Furthermore, incredible as it seems, chipmunks are hunters too. Not as skilled as the cats, of course, but equally cruel. Once, one of the above-mentioned chipmunks caught a wood frog and ate it, swallowing one of its legs and packing the rest of it, still feebly struggling, into his cheek pouches. The frog was almost half the size of the chipmunk, so it didn't fit in easily. 3 or 4 times the chipmunk was forced to drag the dying frog out of his mouth, turn it around, and repack it. So Orion, who may have captured this same chipmunk once or twice, or more than once or twice, seemed almost kind by comparison. Throughout the cat tribe, many individual cats can kill without benefit of experience or education, contrary to an often stated belief that killing is a skill that mother cats, but not father cats, teach their young. Mother cats certainly are teachers, but exactly what they must accomplish with this teaching is imperfectly understood, at least by human beings. A female puma, for instance, who was born in a zoo and knew less than most of us about the ways of the wild, instantly killed an unfortunate young male elk whom her keepers had found injured by the side of a road, and, in order to make a video of their puma killing something, had shoved her into her pen. Even more revealing, perhaps, is the account of a puma named Ruby, who was born on a fur farm but rescued as a tiny kitten by her owner, a wildlife rehabilitator, Lisa Gilmore. Except for her first few weeks of life, Ruby had always lived with Lisa at Lisa's home in Colorado, and was completely uneducated from Puma's point of view. Thus it was impressive to learn how much information on hunting was already in Ruby's head. One evening, Lisa was giving a lecture on pumas at the Denver Museum of Natural History, with Ruby scheduled to make an entrance after the slides had been shown. Friends had offered to help by keeping Ruby occupied until the time came for her to join Lisa, at which point they were to bring her to the lecture hall. The kindly people were doing exactly that, and Ruby, restrained by her collar and her leash, was patiently padding alongside them through the dark, deserted halls of the museum, when in one of the dioramas she spotted a stuffed deer. Instantly she sprang at it, whisking the leash out of her handler's grasp. Alas, she crashed into the glass and dropped to the floor, so the experience for her must have been quite bewildering. Yet for the rest of us, it must be considered extremely illuminating, since Ruby had never done any such thing before. She had never seen any animal killed, let alone a deer. Furthermore, the deer in the exhibit certainly hadn't moved to attract her, nor had it given off a tempting sound or odor. No, Ruby had reacted to its appearance only, and her reaction had been sure and strong. I need a sip of coffee. Give me just a second. I can feel the need for coffee creeping into my existence. That's better. How about another sip? Alright. It's from fresh ground beans. I started using my coffee grinder again. I had to clean it up first, though. Okay, continuing. These episodes show something important about the cat family. That meat eating is deeply ingrained in their nature. Consistent meat eating explains much about all cats, from why, except for size and camouflage, there is very little difference among the 32 species of the family, to why they seldom mark with feces but frequently use urine, which they spray. In short, cats resemble each other because, so far, they have had no reason to change. Good hunters, since the lynx-like cat of the Miocene, from whom the modern cats descend, the cats have had no need to adjust their bodies or their diets in response to major changes in the world's climate. Why not? Because, unlike the diets of other animals, the diets of cats didn't change. The vegetarian menu listed everything from bananas to pecans, from seaweed to eucalyptus leaves, items so different from one another that completely different organisms were required to find, chew, and digest them. But the cat menu listed only one item: meat. So, from a cat's point of view, the difference between a bird who eats cherries, a fish who eats algae, and a giraffe who eats acacia thorns is mainly one of quantity. All three are meat, and a cat can benefit from any one of them if he can catch it. So, while the glaciers came and went, while the vegetarians struggled against all odds trying to digest new plants and adapt themselves to overwhelming global changes, the cats simply kept on hunting, waiting to pounce on whoever managed to survive into the next epoch. The limber cat body that hunted successfully in the Pliocene hunts just as successfully today. Hence, meat eating has formed cat bodies, beginning in the mouth with dagger-like eye teeth, suitable for fastening their owner to a victim, and with strong triangular cheek teeth, capable of severing the victim's spine and shearing his flesh into bite-sized chunks for passage down the cat's throat. Meat eating has caused the shortness of the cat's intestine. Since meat is easy to digest and doesn't require a long, heavy gut that would weigh a cat down and keep him from accelerating quickly, a basic requirement for the feline lurk and leap style of hunting. Meat eating explains the short digestive period, the rapid passage of food through the cat, and the nutritional residue in a cat's feces, which is why a dogs forage in cats' litter boxes and why cats mark with spray. A spray is not as visible as a scat, perhaps, but at least it will still be there when the owner returns to check on it. Thus, finally, meat eating even explains why a cat can twist his penis. Like a gardener spraying roses, a cat can direct his urine upward to moisten the undersides of leaves where other cats will find it and where rain won't wash it away. Okay. Well, I could have lived without hearing that part, but what are you going to do? To anyone's ears I have tainted, I apologize. Moving on. The most important fact about meat eating, however, is that it explains a cat's emotions, or some of them. Many expressions of a cat's feelings seem deeply related to the capture of live prey. An excited, happy, or much relieved cat may ambush and pounce upon whatever triggers its pleasure. Something worth considering before getting a large cat all worked up. One moonless night, when Lisa was out for the evening, Ruby escaped from her pen. Finding herself at large on the isolated homestead high in the Colorado Rockies, Ruby must have felt anxious and unsure of herself while she waited for Lisa to get home and straighten things out. When Ruby heard Lisa's car, she crouched low beside the house, and as Lisa groped her way through the almost prehistoric darkness that surrounds her mountain fastness, Ruby joyously sprang on her from behind and bore her down. It was her way of expressing relief. I have occasionally witnessed similar episodes. The most touching involving a tiger, whose version of a free-floating predatory dream was displayed backstage at an indoor circus one very hot day. The tiger grew increasingly excited at the approach of her trainer, then abruptly stopped leaping and spinning and quickly crouched low to hide behind a solid partition in her cage. When the trainer passed the partition, the tiger sprang at him with her fingers stretched and her claws out. Especially touching, I felt, was the fact that the trainer had not come to feed to this tiger, but to squirt her with a hose to cool her, and she knew it. The prospect not of food but of cool water, and the joy of playing in it, had fired the tiger's excitement so high that she saw herself leaping from ambush. That her concept of climax was to seize her trainer, as she surely would have done without the bars to stop her, is simply a meat-eater's way. Conversely, a committed meat-eater may express affection and even gratitude towards his or her prey, a touching and thoroughly appropriate emotion in a creature for whom captured animal protein is the only source of food. Or so that emotion should seem to us, since in many human societies, people do exactly the same thing when thanking or venerating an animal who has been killed for food. In a tender scene I happened to witness on the African savannah, A lion and some lionesses were rendering the carcass of a female kudu. The lion took the intact but severed head of the kudu between his paws, holding it upright so that she faced him, slowly licked her cheeks and eyes immediately and tenderly, as if he were grooming her, as if she were another beloved lion. Rigor mortis had not yet stiffened her muscles. Under his tongue, her eyelids opened and shut in a lifelike manner. An infant lion pushed up under his father's elbow and helped to wash the kudu's face. Even more touching was a scene that aired on public television several years ago. Shot through such a long lens that the image appears flat and blue with distance. The film shows a large male puma who evidently had just killed a large male bighorn sheep. The sheep is lying dead on his left side. The puma lies down full length on his right side, face to face with the sheep, gazes fondly into the sheep's eyes for a moment, then reaches out his paw and tenderly pats the sheep's face as a kitten might pat its mother. Finally, meat eating, and meat eating alone, accounts for a cat's sense of fun, of play. The only forms of amusement ever attempted by any of the cats are simulations of hunting, whether with toys, with each other's extremities, or with live prey. All three of our cats bring live prey into the house, to release and chase either singly or together. When we see the three cats lined up, peering under a radiator or a bookcase, we know what we'll find there. So, too, do we know that we'll find, and what we'll find, when we hear creatures rushing about in the dark, banging and thumping. My husband and I have great sympathy with the need of cats to hunt, so, except to put the bird feeders very high, we don't interfere with our cats as long as they hunt outside, but it hurts us to watch them torturing their prey, and when a cat comes inside with her head and her high jaws bulging, we rescue her victim. Considering the great behavioral similarities found among the different kinds of cat, and considering the number of actions that cats appear to perform while on automatic pilot, it seems paradoxical that they show so much individuality. Although every cat lover has seen astonishing deeds done by cats, I offer few observations of my own, mostly because, as examples of what cats do that cannot be pre-programmed, they seem spectacular. A few cats, for instance, understand their owner's feelings, or to put it differently, many cats may understand their owner's feelings, but a few cats seem to want to affect them. I was told of a cat who, upon finding her owner lying exhausted and weeping on a bed, lay down beside her with her belly curled over her owner's face, putting her front paws around her owner's head, and folded her owner as she would have enfolded a kitten. Cats also appear to understand the use to which human beings put their things. A cat of ours who brings mice and birds into the house has, on several occasions, put her victims on plates or in bowls. Many cats know what doorknobs are for, and can manipulate them successfully. And, unlike dogs, who, as everyone knows, are apt to regard toilets as drinking fountains, many cats understand the use to which people put toilets, and a few can even figure out an appropriate technique for using one without falling in. House cats are not the only cats with such abilities. Evidently, pumas have them too. One night, again at the Denver Museum of Natural History, Lisa was bringing Ruby from her place of confinement to the lecture hall. Ruby tugged so hard toward the ladies' room that Lisa assumed she wanted to drink from a toilet and didn't refuse her. In the restroom, however, Ruby forced her way into a stall, clambered onto the toilet, and, with her 4 feet on the seat and her tail aloft, she defecated into the bowl. What a cat! Yeah, what a cat indeed. It's quite a sight to see, I would only imagine. My grandmother, Bessie Merrill, had as a young wife a similar experience with a cat. Much to the delight of members of the family, this cat was often seen using the toilet. In those days, indoor plumbing was relatively new, and the toilet was considered too intimate an object to discuss openly. So the talents of this cat were not celebrated outside the immediate family. Yeah, my grandmother on my dad's side of the family, which is this house that I built in Minecraft that you're looking at right now, it's my grandma's house. She had at least one cat that knew how to use the toilet. Most of her cats didn't, so I don't know if she trained the cat or what, but I know she had at least one cat that used the toilet. I actually have to stand up for a minute. I can feel myself needing to stand up pretty badly. So let me just one moment here, and then I'll return, and then I'll continue. I gotta get up and move around for a bit. I wanted to make it to the end of the chapter because there's only 2 pages left, but I really gotta stand up for a second. Get the blood flowing here. I'm about ready for my walk. Alright. I would just read standing up, but I think I'd be too far away from the microphone and it wouldn't sound very good at all. Let's see here. No. There's about 2.5 more pages. Tell you what, I'm gonna come back in just a minute, so there's gonna be a moment of silence. I'll be right back. Kitty. Alright. Hey, Gaiden. Where'd your teddy bear go? Where's Mr. Bear? He's right behind you? Did you move him? Where'd you put the bear? Am I keeping you awake? Oh, you're awake. My kitten's moved his teddy bear somewhere. I don't know where he... Oh, there he is. Okay. So my kitten's teddy bear was on the bunk bed, and then while I was reading, he was looking at me. He moved the bear and put him right behind my chair, so I got a bear behind the chair. Alright, so there's just a couple more pages and then I'll be done. Went on a bit longer than I expected today, but that's alright. Okay. Starting to get warm in here. I'm kind of almost starting to sweat a bit. But I'd rather be too warm than too cold. At least as far as reading goes. I do prefer cold weather, but anyways. If my own cats would do the same, I'd tell the world shamelessly. But they haven't quite got the technique of perching on the edge of the seat, tail high, front paws together, rear paws spread. They know what a toilet is for, though, and they occasionally relieve themselves around the base of the pedestal. This attribute of cats is particularly remarkable in light of the fact that cats in the wild don't seem to have formal dung mittens, where everyone in the local population defecates. Cats do spray where other cats have sprayed or in the same area, but the object of this is almost certainly territorial. Nor is the traditional use the only use to which cats put toilets. Our cats cling to the seat while leaning low to drink from the bowl. But our son's cat dips his left front paw down into the bowl while clinging hard to the seat with the others, then licks the water from his paw. Finished, he jumps down, shakes his paw dry, and walks away. Finally, cats understand many words of their owner's language, although they often don't seem to. And my kitten, I swear, he understands everything I say. It's uncanny. He's learned what the word supper is, so if I say it and he's hungry, he'll perk up. He's really, really smart. So anyways, yes, he's a smart kitten. I happened to notice this when my black cat, Wicca, would sleep on top of my word processor. As her body absorbed the heat from the monitor, her tail would dangle in front of the screen. "Your tail, Wicca," I'd say, and push it aside. One day I was saying, "Your tail," just as the phone rang. Wrong number. When I turned back to clear my view of the screen, I was surprised to see that Wicca had already moved her tail. So, the next time her tail dangled, I didn't touch it, but just asked. Eyes shut as if fast asleep, Wicca simply moved her tail so that it folded around her body and didn't hide the screen. And from then on, all I ever needed to do was say, "Your tail." Wicca, who specialized in hunting birds, died tragically in the claws of a bird, a great horned owl. One of her successors is a cat named Christmas, who also sleeps on my monitor and also dangles her tail. To my surprise, it turned out that Wicca wasn't the only cat who understood the meaning of words. If asked, Christmas sometimes also moves her tail. However, Christmas seems to want something in return for doing me so great a favor. Seizing my hand with both of hers, claws out, she brings it up to her head so that I can scratch her. Finally, I offer the doings of a cat named Wazzo, who lives in Massachusetts with my friend Margie Bourne. An intelligent, mature male, Wazzo is interested in dogs, whom he manipulates. As in many households with dogs and cats, Wazzo is fed on top of the refrigerator so that the dogs won't eat his food. When he eats, the dogs eye him from below. From time to time, he picks out a kibble and puts it at the edge of the refrigerator's table-like top and flips it over with his paw. A dog finds it on the floor and eats it. At one time, Wazzo also fed the dogs from bowls of candy that had been left on a table, but as he saw it, candy was fit only for dogs. He himself didn't partake of it, although the dogs ate it, wrapper and all. Yet, there is a reciprocal aspect to the relationship. Wazzo is a very territorial cat who values his space and hates to see another cat intrude upon it. Nevertheless, in his community, which is urban, many other cats are always prowling about. When one comes into his yard, Wazzo goes into the house and somehow manages to communicate the presence of a rival to the dogs, who then burst out to the door and chase away the stranger. Margie doesn't know how her cat communicates his problem to the dogs, but communicate he does. In the wink of an eye, the dogs are out of the house and the strange cats are gone. Most species of cat have never been studied, to be sure, but because cats are notably different as tigers, pumas, and house cats show surprising amounts of individuality, it is probably not unreasonable to guess that the other kinds of cats might too. It is as if Gaia had said to the cats, "Here, my beauties, the information you need in order to hunt, mate, fight, yowl, be cautious, raise children, is safely packed in the back of your brains. Save your forebrains for whatever creative inventions may strike you. Use your wits to amuse yourselves and me." End of chapter. Cool. So the next chapter doesn't have a title. Let's see. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so anyways. Alright, that's going to do it for me today. I don't really have much else to say. But if anybody listened, thank you. And if nobody listened, that's fine too. It gives me at least an excuse to read. So I'm okay with that. Otherwise, I would never get around to it. I would just lay in bed and do other things. But it gives me a reason to read. So who knows? Maybe next time I'll get started on Ozma of Oz. I almost said Return to Oz. That's the movie. And the movie's based on Ozma of Oz. Alright, I need to get up and walk around and do stuff. I gotta go for a walk. So, I'm gonna end it here. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back when I can. So, take care, everyone. Bye.